Andy, you always use this word, or you use this word in your lecture, kenosis. Can you tell me what that word means?
Yeah, so kenosis actually comes from Paul's letter to the Philippians, and it comes from this piece. Kenosis means in Greek self-emptying, and it comes from what we think is probably the oldest piece of the New Testament, which is this hymn that we call the Christ hymn, where it talks about Jesus self-emptying and this act of kenosis. So I'm wondering, and what I'm trying to explore and tried to explore in this lecture is, does this kind of self-emptying that Paul particularly seems very connected to, how do we think about that in the framework of ministry? How do we think of kenosis as a mark of ministry, and particularly ministry to young people? And again, what I'm really interested in is, I guess, again, the through line of my work is to think about how we can help young people imagine the action and presence of God in their life. And I think kenosis becomes a way of thinking about how this God acts, and particularly how this God acts in the person of Jesus Christ. And one of the ways, if you remember that Christ hymn, as it starts, although Jesus was powerful and mighty, he emptied himself, took on the form of a servant. And we do, it's the right way to translate it, although, but some scholars have also said that you can look at that word although and also translate it because. So that this isn't just that God really is this kind of God who stands above us and judges us, and that we're is far away from us. And then this one time, Jesus, he decided that he was going to be nice to us, and although he's really super powerful, he decided to hang out with us for a while. That's tended to be, especially when we talk to fifth graders, eighth graders about that theological concept, that tends to be how we frame it. But that actually, for me, if you look at it, the although as the because, what you see is that throughout the biblical text, that this is a God who continues to come to us in this humble way of being a minister. Or as Paul will say in the Corinthians letters, will come foolishness, the foolishness of a minister. And what I find so fascinating about it, some New Testament scholars have pushed that it's possible. I mean, I don't think we know this for sure, but that this hymn may be one of the first things that Paul kind of learned as he had his conversion experience, and it becomes a framework for how he thinks God moves in the world. So Paul chooses to know only Christ and him crucified, because it's through this experience of co-crucifixion that we actually encounter the power of God in resurrection. So for me, the kenosis isn't, I really hope it doesn't just become theological jargon. And there's deep wells of it that I'm not even qualified to touch on, that other scholars have done incredible work on. But what I'm trying to push is, as we think about it, think about the framework and the shape of ministry itself. Does kenosis give us a way of thinking about the shape of ministry? So it leads, first of all, to use other Greek words, which is dangerous. Does it first of all ministry, the Bonhoeffer story I think reflects this, does ministry first lead to a hypostatic experience, where I see your personhood, you see my personhood, but then I'm called in to minister to you, or for you to minister, or for me to allow you to minister to me, and that is an act of kenosis, where I have to go to you, or I have to be willing to receive your ministry, which then leads to a sense of transformation, which in some Christian traditions we've called theosis, and do those things kind of hang together? So I'm really interested in how kenosis becomes, in many ways, the peak of this narrative shape of ministry itself. It's an encounter with personhood that leads to an entering into a death experience, an experience of questioning, of doubt, that then leads to a transformation at some level. And I'm still testing that out, but I think we need stories and narratives that shape us, and the best of the theological is to help us think in these stories and narratives. And I'm wondering if kenosis does that, also with the fear that it becomes a little theologically jargonish, but maybe powerful too.